No one lays down the law like Car and Key. This is the Law Report on SAFM.
And a very good evening to you and welcome to tonight's Law Report program. Well, it's my first day back at work after my leave, and I've spent a very relaxing leave just chilling out and really just trying to build up some energy for the new year. And I hope that you're going to be joining me on the show this evening and phoning in with some questions and some answers and topics and all sorts of things. And tonight being once a month that we do our law clinic here on SAFM with attorney Nicoline Skuman-Low. So we're going to talk about all sorts of different topics when it comes to the law. Obviously, we're not going to talk about labour issues or property issues because those will be coming up later on this month. So anything else that you'd like to talk about, you can join us. And my guest this evening, once again, is attorney Nicoline Skuman-Low. She's a director of Skuman Law Inc. and they're attorneys, conveyancers and notaries public. Nicoline, good evening. Welcome to the show and happy 2016.
Thank you for having me and happy 2016. May it be a fantastic one.
I hope so. And you can call us if you have any questions, 0892 10 2010, 0892 10 2010. Well, it's our first live show of the year because, as I said, I've been on leave until tonight. And I think what we should talk about, Nicoline, is New Year's resolutions. And when it comes to you, that is make a will. So maybe we should make that our New Year's resolution, because most of them we're saying, well, we're going to the gym, or we're not going to eat this, or we're going to give up chocolate. That never lasts. But making a will is something that's going to really stand you in good stead, you and your family. So maybe that should be our New Year's resolution this year.
Yeah, definitely. I think that should be one of the most important New Year's resolutions that we make this year. And also to, I think, be a little more preventative in our approach. And that includes having a will, of course. Planning ahead and making sure things are in order, your affairs are in order when it comes to your will. Making sure if you have children that they are taken care of, to do that through a will or a testamentary trust if they are still very young. To make sure that if you have a fairly large estate, we apply some estate planning strategies to make sure that everything runs as smoothly as it can when the inevitable happens. You know, as they say, two things are certain, and those are death and taxes. So,
unfortunately, yes.
Definitely something to be planning for, regardless of what you're doing for a living. When it comes to business, I think equally important to be a little more preventative. 2015, as we've analysed it, seemed to be the year of a lot of crisis management. A lot of firms have reported that they've dealt with quite a lot of court work. In other words, more reactive work. Something goes wrong and you react to it, or you're not happy with how something was handled and you react to it and you deal with it through the court processes, which can be very costly, very time consuming, and it may not always result in the outcome that you wanted it to have. The court processes, particularly in our lower courts, are often take much, much longer than anticipated because there are just so many people that need legal assistance. So often people are not aware of that. They're also not always aware of the process that needs to be followed. So it becomes a very, very much a disappointing process or a disappointing outcome to many people. And that's why we really say, fair enough, we can't predict everything in life. We are not psychics after all, but we can at least assess risks and assess things that could potentially end up there and see what we can do in order to prevent it from getting there in the first place. So a few practical things really for businesses. Firstly, make sure you know your business. In other words, the accountants often say, know your numbers, know what is going well, what is not. If you're struggling with a bit of cash flow, look into why you're struggling. Is it because people are not paying? Are they not paying on time? Could you maybe ask for a deposit, a part payment before you render your service or deliver your product, or work on a COD basis? So many of these factors need to be considered properly. And also, of course, any contracts, employees, service providers. Are you paying your service providers too early? That may also negatively affect cash flow. I mean, if you have 30-day terms, why pay them on receipt of the invoice? I know most of us are adverse to debt, which is a good thing, but I think in good balance if you want to maintain a healthy cash flow. And as they say, cash is king, so protect your cash and just plan a little ahead. And if you haven't had anyone look at your contracts for a while, it's always good to just have a bit of a look and seeing if nothing has maybe developed or changed, or isn't there a better way of doing things lately, and have them updated. It's usually much less costly than have someone iron or wash the dirty laundry in a public forum or on some Hello Peter type of website.
And the problem now, I'm not to be a pessimist at all, but I mean, we're looking at the exchange rate. Business is going to be hit quite hard this year, unfortunately. So, people I'm not being cynical here, but I think a lot more people are possibly going to take a little bit more of a chance or try and delay the payment. So you need to have all those proper procedures in place before you start, because
Definitely.
you could end up then being in a situation where your business is going to suffer because somebody else is having a problem.
Exactly. We often hear, just by way of example, that December and January businesses don't get paid, and that's when your debtors are at the highest. Simply because most of your clients are spending their money elsewhere, on holidays and gifts and dates that they've incurred over the holiday period, as opposed to settling the bills that they ran up in November and early December. So one needs to, if you know that's the type of cycle that also affects your business, you need to plan in advance to say, what are we going to do to strengthen cash flow during November so that those aspects don't really affect us. Then, of course, the whole issue of compliance.
Yes.
We saw a lot of new measures being introduced in 2015. Some of them are effective already, some are not yet effective. But I think the most pressing one is BBBEE. If your financial year end is 28 February, it means from the 1st of March you need to be verified under the new codes. That's obviously oversimplifying the process of implementation, but that's a good guideline for most businesses out there. 28 February is when things are going to change quite drastically, and when there won't be a choice between old codes and new codes anymore. So if you don't have your ducks in a row, you don't know what this means to you, you really need to find out. And you need to have the assessments done, see what your options are, what are your business strategies going forward, and how would BBBEE really fit into that as opposed to becoming an additional compliance factor.
And you'd need a professional to explain this to you, because I
Yes.
don't think this is something that you possibly, I've had a look at some of these new rules and regulations, and really the layman like myself, you look at it and it's like looking at a Greek text. You need somebody to actually explain this to you, and rather get somebody professional to do that than try and sort it out in yourself, and you end up in trouble.
Definitely. And
What happens if you're not compliant? What is, before I do that, let me just tell people if they want to call in, it's 0892 10 2010, 0892 10 2010. What happens if you're not compliant on the 1st of March?
Well, obviously from the 1st of March, you need to be verified under the new code. So if you can manage to be verified by 28 February, before your financial year end, then you are still okay for another couple of months. But, as I say, there's a little more detail to the compliance, but just for ease of reference, let's stick to the 28th, or actually the 29th of February.
Oh, you've got an extra year this year.
Just to
An
be
extra day.
completely
just to
correct.
confuse everybody, okay?
So, but your financial year end in February is pretty much the trigger that this would be the last time you would be verified under the old codes. Now, if you're not compliant, it's not like some other pieces of legislation where you'll be fined or imprisoned or something like that. It's more of an economic penalty. So if you're doing business with larger businesses, your big corporates, or if you're doing business with government, tenders and those sort of things, then you need to be BBBEE compliant.
Okay, so you're not going to be doing business with them anymore.
Otherwise, you just won't get that tender. With the big corporates, they are obviously doing quite a lot of business with government, and it's a bit of a trickle-down effect or a domino effect.
So their suppliers have to be compliant.
Exactly, and each supplier that is not is actually dragging their own scores down. So some of these guys have become extremely aggressive in their compliance measures, and they've actually given notice to any supplier who doesn't at least meet the level 4, and some other industries level 3 or 2. So it's really important that you know how this would affect you. And even if you're not in the space of doing big business, let's for ease of reference call it big business and government. If you're not in that space yet, but of course we all want to grow our businesses and get there, then at least know what you'll need to do and have a plan to phase it in little by little so that you don't have such a huge cost to be compliant when you haven't planned and you have to do it quickly. Also be aware, if I can give all the listeners out there some practical advice, be aware and beware of these consultants that are out there. Some of them do not have any legal qualifications. And ideally, I believe, to be a really good advisor on BBBEE, you need to have a legal background training. In other words, you need to have legal training. You need to have a professional legal qualification. And secondly, you need to understand the financial aspects, because the whole scorecard is a calculation. So in addition to understanding what the regulations means, you need to be able to do the calculations. So if your attorney is an expert, that's great, but make sure that you also discuss this with your auditor, the person who can crunch the numbers and give you a good reflection as to how the calculations would work, what you need to change to become more compliant.
So we've given them enough warning now. We're beginning of January, well, middle of January, effectively almost.
Yes.
And they haven't really got that much time.
No, definitely not. So, just be aware that there are quite a few guys out there trying to really leverage this opportunity that government has given them in terms of these regulations that have been introduced. Be aware of the fact that there are guys out there that will try and sell you the moon and the stars at a very competitive rate. If it's too cheap, you need to ask a few questions. And before you appoint someone, ask them what their qualifications are, how long they've been doing this. There are very good consultants out there. I'm not just saying it's only attorneys that can advise, but make sure it's a suitably qualified person that has had experience and that can show you some success rates, that can show you, okay, I've restructured this and I've advised this person, that they can give you testimonials.
And feel free to call and ask for a reference from whoever they've worked with. I'm sure it would be fine.
Get a second opinion, get a second quotation. Unfortunately, I've seen so many clients who have been bamboozled, for lack of a better phrase, by some of these consultants who've promised them the whole world and a few stars at almost nothing, or an exorbitant rate, and then they run away with the money. So if you rather contract with an attorney, if you've paid any money and you don't get your service, then at least you can go to the law society. There's insurance in place. But with some of those guys, they pack up and leave and you never hear from them again. And it doesn't just apply to the BEE. It's just very prevalent in that space at the moment, but some of labor consultants and different facets. So always, if you're not working with a professional that is registered with a professional body, whether it is an auditor or an accountant or an attorney, make sure that you know exactly who you're dealing with. You want to see their registration certificates, their insurance, and all of that. Make sure they're in good standing before you pay any money.
I mean, that goes for almost anything. I mean, I saw an advert the other day for a swimming pool company, and part of their advertising was the fact that they were a member of the National Swimming Pool Institute. Now, they are obviously registered with them, and there's some sort of backup that you can get if there's a problem.
Yes.
Rather than the guy who comes around with a bucket and a spade and starts digging a hole in your garden, I don't think you're going to have too much luck if the pool starts leaking.
Exactly,
You know?
and it goes for most of the construction industry, really. So I think it's really just be more mindful.
We have to this year, we're watching our money this year.
Yeah, watch your money, and just by dealing with a few practicalities, check if cash flow is not healthy, why, and what you can do, and then have a plan.
And whatever you do, don't pay up the full amount up front either, because a lot of people do that, and then the guy does, as you say, run away with the money, and then you don't get the service at all.
Or if you have to pay up front, make sure it's someone that is registered with a professional body. That's, for example, attorneys, law societies, those type of things as well. Verification agents, quite important in terms of BBBEE, need to be registered with an accreditation body. So again, something you need to check. If you need to be verified, in other words, your scorecard calculated, there are two types of certification that these guys can have: SANAS and IRBA. Now, SANAS is the more, what we in industry describe as more conservative. So they are consultants that would apply in a more the code in a more conservative fashion. Nothing wrong with the way they score. That's just generally the different approach. And then URBA is the accountants. So they deal with the verification in more of an auditing type of fashion. So that's what you can expect between the two different ones. But importantly, if you are being verified, make sure that your certificate comes from someone who is properly accredited. Otherwise, you've spent the money and your certificate means nothing.
Yeah, and as I said, this year is going to be very tight with
It's going to be very tight.
exchange. We had some friends who had friends out from England who thought it was for the first time ever in Cape Town and thought it was the most fabulous thing. And I said, well, obviously it was the most fabulous thing. It didn't cost them anything. They probably stayed here for nothing almost.
Yes.
On what, almost 25 or 26 to the rand to the pound. I mean, it's just laughable.
It's quite, things are going to get very tough. And I think many of us have relied quite heavily either on big business, which means this BEE discussion is really very important, because that will directly correlate your ability to either do the same as you did last year or better. And then those of us who have a substantial foreign client base. Now, it's good for our foreign clients because they think it's very competitive in order to do
free,
business with
basically,
us.
in my view, it's free.
Almost, definitely. We also have a substantial foreign client base, and we've been getting massive compliments about our rates. So we can have a little bit of a chuckle about it, but
it's not funny, actually.
One needs to be mindful that if you are buying from overseas, then this will directly affect your profit margin, which is in a negative way. So you'll need to either revisit your suppliers, or you'll have to look into local manufacturing if that's your game. So I think this year will be an interesting one. It will teach us a little bit of tenacity, but the more reason to make sure that be preventative. Make sure that you rather go and see your attorney, your accountant, the core providers to your business, and make sure that you know your business, you know your numbers, you know where your risk factors are, and that you can prioritize what to deal with first. That you don't get caught, in a bad spot and you need to do something really quickly.
I always say what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. So maybe we'll all be very strong at the end of this year.
I hope so.
Yeah, make us look. But on the other hand, it's not a bad thing, because maybe we've been a bit lackadaisical and slack up to now. But now we have to start taking things very seriously now and do things properly. So maybe it's a good thing that we're almost being forced to do it properly now.
Definitely. And I think also the bridge between business and your personal affairs, often people are so cash flow driven, and I maintain what I've said earlier about cash is king. It fuels the machine. I'm completely for that. But you need to remember that you need to make sure that you prioritize not only in terms of short-term return. You need to always keep in mind, what do I want to achieve? What is my goal? What is my vision? Where am I going in my personal space and in my business? And how do I make sure that these two work together and speak the same language, as opposed to fighting each other and affecting each other negatively? In other words, I can't use my business as a personal piggy bank to live above my means and not have a will and, be reckless, really. Because at the end of the day, then if there's nothing else to take, then of course we look at, you hold shares in a business, even though there's limited liability. So we need to make sure that both aspects of our lives, the work portion as well as the personal portion, are really planned better, have that will, revise it, make sure it still fits.
We'll talk some more about wills in a moment. If you've got any questions, 0892 10 2010, 0892 10 2010. We have a caller on the line. Pikey in Cape Town, good evening.
Karen, compliments of New Year, including our guest in the studio today. Thank you very much for taking my call.
It's a pleasure, and Happy New Year and compliments of the season to you too.
Thank you, dear. You know what? I am listening to our guests taking us through, especially the listenership of SAFM tonight. It's so important, so very important, so truthful what she says. And at the back of my mind, I'm sitting here thinking about the emerging entities, and I want to, in fact, I just wanted to comment, it's not a question as such, that it is very, very, very important that entrepreneurs, especially emerging companies, to seek help. Never, ever, ever, ever want to do it yourself, especially now that we've actually come out of so many years of fronting. There are so many things that are due to happen, especially with the current, that is now the recent amendments to the employment laws, including the BBBEE. But basically what I wanted to say, Karen, is that I agree totally with our guest in the studio that please don't attempt to do it yourself. Of course, yes, you can do it. You can do it yourself if you know how to do your numbers, if you know how to do this and that and everything. But never ever underestimate the power of very each and every word that actually builds up into a sentence that speaks to your finances, the finances of your company, especially when the entities are coming into mergers and acquisition or partnership and the like and so forth. It goes. Please, small entities, emerging entities, when you get into this type of relationships, seek a legal opinion. We are always there. Thank you very much, Karen.
Paki,
and thank you once again for always sending me the updates, Karen, right?
It's a pleasure.
Receive them.
It's a pleasure. Paki, you brought up two very important points that I wanted to discuss further with Nicoline. One was the fact of emerging businesses, because this is, I think, they are possibly most at risk when it comes to non-payment of accounts and things.
You know what is happening with the emerging businesses? I can tell you, opportunities are there.
Yes.
Opportunities are there, especially for promising entrepreneurs.
Completely.
Especially for promising entrepreneurs. But however, as business owners, you can unfortunately or fortunately, let me be positive in this, you can know one thing, but you can never know everything. That is why we always say, concentrate on running your business. Concentrate on what you know best. But there are those soft issues. There are those other things, especially when the law is coming into existence. Seek help.
Yes.
Seek help all the time.
Yeah, Paki, I mean, that's very relevant points. And the other thing you brought up, and I'm hoping that it doesn't still happen, but I think possibly, unfortunately... Fronting, yeah. Does it still happen to the same extent, though? I'm hoping that it's not that bad.
It is. It is. It's just that we know of those that have been reported. But then, if you look at with microscopic view, you would actually find, unless perhaps the those who have actually been doing it, because the law now is very strict. You know, earlier on you asked our guest what are the penalties. Definitely there will be penalties. It's just that perhaps like we're still in the window period, but then soon down the line there are going to be very stringent measures to safeguard against should there be any continuation of fronting. But then I want to believe that there is actually still already, especially those who have been taken for granted. I'm still talking about the emerging entrepreneurs, emerging entities. Perhaps our guest in the studio can actually comment further, Karen.
I'd like her to do that. Paki, you brought up some very valid points. Thank you very much indeed for getting through to us this evening.
My pleasure. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much. Enjoy the evening.
Wonderful.
Good night. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Now, if you have any questions or comments, you can call us on 0892 10 2010, 0892 10 2010. And we're not just talking about business and BBBEE. We're also talking about Nicoline's favorite subject, which is wills and trusts and making sure that all your ducks are in a row. For heaven forbid something happens to you, your family will not be suddenly left with all this drama. So if you have any questions about that as well, please do call in, or basically anything, except we're not talking about labour law and property law tonight. But Nicoline, Paki brought up some very interesting points, and this fronting thing, I really thought that we pretty much got rid of that, but he seems to think it's still there quite badly.
I think let's start with the most serious of the comments, and unfortunately, one aspect is that I completely agree with him, is that we don't have truthful data.
True.
We've got stats when in terms of reported fronting and reported scandals, but we don't have those where no one complains. I can tell you, in 2015, I was exposed to an excess of 12 potential fronting transactions, where I represented the person who was being victimized in those situations. And unfortunately, from my experience, statistically speaking, most of them were emerging. So possibly the guys that really need that cash injection or they really need this partner so that they can take this project or product or service of theirs to the next level. So they are sort of dependent on making this deal work. And often they will sacrifice some crucial aspects, which are known as fronting. In other words, you often see transactions structured where these guys do not have a managerial say. They don't have a board seat. Sometimes it goes as far as voting, no voting rights or limited voting rights.
So their name is basically on the letterhead and that's it.
Or it's structured in such a way that it doesn't say any of these things, but the practical effect of it is. So, or you get correspondence which says, no, but I never intended for you to be a director. You get some shares, and you get your 30 shares, that you have a 30%. But or 25. Usually it's 25, by the way, so that, I'm the other shareholder and I can actually have a meeting with myself to make decisions, because the most important decisions in a company need 75%. So, some of these are structured in such a way that it practically affects that. In my view, I think fronting, despite the legal definition, to sort of go more into the spirit of the legislation, I think whenever you structure a deal in such a way that you are practically causing some form of fronting or some form of an inability to vote or to have managerial say or control in the business with your BBBEE partner, in my view, that's fronting. Whether that would be the view of the commissioner that they will be appointing in the courts, remains to be seen. Hopefully more people will now report these incidents because of the commissioner's appointment, that it's more of a ombud structure, which could be more cost effective than going to court against your big corporate partner, which has unlimited resources. So hopefully these things get done. And also hopefully transactions get structured within the spirit of saying, let's work together and we make this work, without saying, oh, I want to make this work, but I don't want you to do this, and I don't want you to take part in that. So actually not my partner. You're a little better than, you've just had a little upgrade to just something between my partner and my employee, somewhere in there. I think just maintain the spirit of, if you want to have a partner, it's a very different relationship that you need to cultivate. Then the aspect of the emerging entrepreneur, just briefly, I have one or two comments. Firstly, there's a lot of potential in that space. And these guys, I can't stress it enough, rather make sure when you're fundraising or when you're getting your financials in order to start your business, make sure that you have a little bit of a budget for legal. Make a few phone calls, ask many firms, including ourselves, structure fee agreements in different ways in order to accommodate any size of business. Because the idea is to build a relationship with each other. So shop around, as they say, find someone that can fit into your budget, or if you can't make that work, come to an agreement and find a way to make it work. But please don't put legal off. And similarly, I want to add, don't put financials off. If you're not a numbers admin person, then rather negotiate with someone that can help you with that. Do educate yourself so that you know the basics, so that you can see if something is going wrong. I'm not one to believe that you must just outright delegate any of those
You
functions.
need to keep your own finger on the pulse here. So don't
Totally.
Because otherwise the next thing, I'm not saying they all do this, but there have been occasions when people who are dealing with the finances wander off with the finances.
Exactly.
And you
by
don't
the
know
time
what's
you
going on.
realize
It's too late.
It's too late, and they've disappeared and they've spent the cash. The second comment is, it's often much more cost effective if you start your business to make sure that your ducks are on a row, and as it grows, you add things. It's a little bit like building a house from your Lego blocks. So you'll build your little structure, and as you go along, you put more and you put more and you put more. Most of us don't have one major block that you chunk down and, oh, I've got a little house now. It's a little bit by little bit, and there are smaller pieces and bigger pieces that go on top of one another to construct this little toy structure that you are building. Or if you want to compare it to a real live house with your foundations and all of that, it's often much cheaper to put governance structures and all these things in place and to evolve them and to grow them and to improve them as you need to, as opposed to just doing things. And then one day you really need that loan from the bank, or you need that investor, or you want to merge with someone. And then they say, oh no, listen, you've got a brilliant idea. But
the structure's about to fall down.
But yeah, we can't touch this, I'm sorry. Or then you have to quickly do something, and then you need to do some extensive renovations to get it market ready before you're able to do so. So make sure
So it's
do that.
Pre-planning, I think, is
Pre-planning
where we start.
all goes back to that. So it's very valuable points made by Paki.
Paki, thank you so much. You really sort of generated some very interesting conversation here. Thank you for the call. Right. Melvin in Port Elizabeth wants to talk about the lotto, but if you have any questions, it's 0892 10 2010. 0892 10 2010. Melvin, good evening. You want to talk about the lotto?
Yes, good evening.
Hello.
Yeah. Now, I just wanted to know, man, 10 years ago, I played with a person, the lotto.
Mm-hmm.
So I asked him to take in the ticket, but I made one mistake. I didn't write down the numbers.
Okay.
So the next morning, I came from work. The Sunday morning, I came from work, went down to his house about 11 o'clock, and his wife said, no, he's gone to the soccer. Okay. So following week, I was now 2 to 10. So I thought, now I didn't think any bad about don't trust. You see? So the next Saturday, I thought we must play much together again. Only to find out, she said, no, he's gone to work. And so it went on. And then afterwards, I was just losing now interest and say, hey, man, all right, leave this, or I'm going to monitor him. Now, what I'm asking you, ever since that time, this man's life has just expanded, And I'm asking myself, hey, man, how can I now get a legal opinion of, do I have a case or what? Can you help me maybe?
Sure. Unfortunately, there's a common law rule when it comes to the proceeds of any form of gambling. That includes lotto and betting on horses and poker games and anything that you would really associate with gambling.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, the law doesn't protect any verbal agreements made between people for the payment of any gambling money. So in your instance, unfortunately, the law doesn't make any provision for protecting you. Unfortunately, same goes if you were to bet on a horse, win, and send someone else to collect the winnings, and they ran off with it. It's somewhat of an old-fashioned rule. I'm sorry to be the bearer of bad news, but it hasn't yet, to my knowledge, been repealed. So, unfortunately, from a legal perspective, you can't sue him in a court of law or write him a letter. I mean, you can try, but it can't go further than that, unfortunately.
Basically, it's down to his conscience, basically.
Yes.
At this point.
It's horrible.
So isn't there even like in America, they got this lie detector test?
That's not. I don't think that's admissible in court, though.
Unfortunately, not, because it's subjective, and if you suffer from certain mental disorders, or if you are very strong-willed, you can manipulate the test results. So, for those reasons, our courts do not hold much value to lie detector tests.
They're not admissible in court in America either, as far as I know.
No.
They use them really just to get a general idea of whether the person's telling the truth or not, but they can't do anything with the results.
Okay. No, okay.
Sorry, Melvin.
Shame, man. I'm sorry.
It was something I was listening to your show every Monday, but it's most of property, law, labor, And I said, hey, when this topic going to come where you can just ask something? So thanks very much for that answer.
Okay, Melvin. Sorry about that. And then the moral of the story, Melvin, next time play the lotto on your own and go and fetch your own winnings.
Yes.
No, I've learned something. No worry.
Okay. I hope you have a very lucky 2016.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Melvin.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye now. Right. If you want to call in, we've got about 20 minutes left. It's 0892 10 20 10. Renee in Santon, good evening.
Good evening, Corinne.
Hello.
And good evening to your guest.
Thank
Hi
you.
there.
Compliment to the season to you both.
And to you too, Renee. How can we help you?
Okay, I just wanted to know, for example, if you have got a trust or you have got money, let's say, in a 5-year contract.
Yes.
Okay. And you actually, in the contract, you're allowed to cede the contract to whoever you wish.
Yes.
All right. Now, I believe that if you've got something like this, you're quite safe in a will because it doesn't really even go in. It actually goes directly to the person.
Yes.
Okay. Now, that means, I think, I just want to know this.
Yes.
Which is the safest way to go where the money cannot be contested?
Well, in cases of most insurance policies, I always advise that clients do not make any mention of this in their wills, and it's not because of an underhanded arrangement.
Yeah.
The regulations do make provision for it. You'll actually nominate your beneficiary or you'll cede the policy, depending on the type of policy, to the person. And once the trigger event has happened, so let's say it's a life policy and you pass on, the minute they have the death certificate in their possession, then they pay to your beneficiary. And it cannot be contested. I mean, unless someone runs to court and says, listen, this is not the signature. But usually with these insurance documents, you sign it in the presence of your broker and it goes through a whole process. So to my knowledge, there hasn't been any reported cases where anyone has contested funds being paid through an insurance policy to someone. Okay. The trouble always comes on, in my experience, on a will where you bequeath some of your policies or investments or properties or whatever, instead of nominating the beneficiary or ceding the policy, as I've just said, and then people actually contest the will, the authenticity of the will. And often wills are made out using the CNA template, or not just the CNA, but I mean the news agency template that you filled in by hand, and you've done so late at night, and you've gotten your neighbor and your friend to quickly sign witness, and maybe none of those people are available to confirm that yes, they did see you sign, and yes, this is your signature, and then it goes to court and it becomes a question of who can prove on a balance of probabilities that was your signature.
What I wanted to also ask you is, I don't know if this is a question you can answer or not, but I'd just like to know, what is your feeling of a trust in the bank? And if, let's say you've got a member of family and it happens to be your own child, and you do not want your child to know anything about what's happened with your money. What happens in a case if that person is not left in the will? Can they come forward and say, I've got right and I am entitled to it?
Well, in terms of, it depends what type of trust you'll be setting up.
Well, it's a trust when you pass on.
Okay, you get two types of trusts.
Correct.
You get a testamentary trust and an inter vivos trust. So if you want to keep it completely separate from your estate, in other words, that no one has to say, okay, in terms of the will, I had to create a trust and this is the portion that I paid over. Then there's a record of it. There's an accounting of that transaction once you've created the trust. If you don't want that paper trail, you need to create the trust now so that you can then bequeath it in the will, or you can start moving whichever asset you want in the trust. You can do so now. It really depends on much more detail of what you're trying to achieve. But when can someone contest something like that, or a child say, listen, I'm entitled to something? Only if it's a minor child that is still financially dependent on the parent.
Or an adult child, possibly
then
a disabled adult child, you
maintenance.
can, yes.
Yes, then a maintenance claim can be forthcoming. Or if it's your spouse, again, a maintenance claim in terms of the Surviving Spouses Act. So you cannot completely disinherit your spouse either.
No, that I understand. That I understand. But as far as children are concerned, that you can do?
Yes, if they have reached the age of majority and they are not financially dependent on you any longer. I mean, regardless if they're doing really well for themselves or not, if they're not dependent as they were when they were living with you, when they were minors, then they are not, in the eyes of the law, generally speaking, financially dependent, and then they don't have a claim.
But
anyone can go and say, I want money. Whether
Yes,
you'll be successful
this
or
is
not
it.
is the
Yes.
real question.
Yes, but Nicola, from what I understand from you, you would say the contract is a better way to really go.
The contract, you mean the trust,
No,
the
not
interview.
the trust, the contract.
Oh, you mean like
The insurance. Yeah,
Yes,
when you've got a
actually
policy,
put
for
the
example.
beneficiary on the pot. Most of
Yes.
these insurance things normally ask you when you take it out who the beneficiary is.
Yes.
Yes.
And you can change it. I mean, there's no
Yes.
no problem. You can decide when you take it out. There's a beneficiary, and a couple of years
Or
down
there
the
can be
line,
more than one
you can
beneficiary.
change. They do ask you how what percentage of this do you want that particular beneficiary to
and you
get,
can-
and you
yeah.
can chop and change it as long as you're alive. You can
Yes.
make any changes you want, but that is
Understood.
more. It will be stronger
Yeah.
than if you put that. Don't
Correct.
mention the fact that you've got X number of insurance policies.
Thank
Don't
you.
put that in the will.
Thank you,
And
Colin.
if you do choose to do that because it's a good estate planning strategy, if a professional has advised you to the contrary, if there is some reason to do that, make sure you sign a will. And I wouldn't recommend with a financial institution of any sorts. I would do it with an attorney. We are trained to do these things, and that you then sign it at the attorney's office in front of witnesses that are competent and that can obviously say if it ever gets contested, then they can say, no, but here are the two people. They are not unidentifiable. It's not someone we can't remember or can't make out who this was. It was signed at my attorney's office, and the attorney can then also say, yeah, I was also there, and these people did sign in my presence. And that then obviously also deals with any possibility of your will being challenged.
Yes. Nicola, tell me, you're actually in Cape Town, aren't you?
Yes, I am.
Okay, and you don't have any branch or anything in Johannesburg, for example, no?
Unfortunately not, but we do have quite a few clients up there, so we've got facilities to be able to deal with that. If you're interested, Karen can just connect us after the show.
That would be very nice.
Okay, Renee, if you'd like, I'll put you back to my producer, and if you can just give him your email address, I'll send you Nicolene's contact details.
Thank you very much
Okay,
for
so
that,
Renee,
Colin, and thank you very much for helping.
It's
Only
a
a pleasure.
pleasure.
Renee, hold the line, and they're going
you.
to take the call back now.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for getting through. If you'd like to call through, if you have any questions, 0892 10 2010, 0892 10 2010. Pumlani in Glencoe, good evening.
Good evening, Karen. How are you doing?
I'm very well. Compliments of the season to you.
Same to you, and hi to the guest.
Thank
Hi.
you. How can we help you, Pumlani?
Yes, I'm calling more about the question that I have is more criminal law related. It specifically deals with arrest.
Okay.
Yeah. Recently, I've been thinking of a situation where online I read it was a U.S. case, Plummer versus State.
Mm-hmm.
In that case, it dealt with whether the public, whether a person in public has the right to defend themselves in a situation of an unlawful arrest where an officer uses unnecessary force. So in that case, what was held was that an individual is entitled where, in terms of the law, the police officer does not have a warrant of arrest, and even in the case of an arrest without a warrant, goes beyond the provisions laid out in their statutes. So what I've been thinking is whether in South Africa would something like that ever apply? And what I did was I went under, I think, Section 40, subsection 1, and I had a look of the CPA, and I had a look. I read through it. I read through it, and tried to analyze it myself with some friends. Looking at specifically at what's this thing, Section 40, subsection 1, E and F, which speaks of and G, E, F, and G, that speak to the reasonability of someone being suspected, one being in a place especially in a suburb at night, found in a possession of some items that a police officer would suspect would be like used for crime and stuff. So what I thought was whether, like, in the case where a police officer comes to you and they they're arresting you without a warrant, and they try to say, oh, we suspect you of transgressing the law, and then what they do is they use force, like unnecessary force, like they use guns or they slap you around, even though there's no prior provocation. Would I, as an individual, be entitled to I wouldn't say I resist, but like defend myself against a police officer, like use self-defense against a police officer?
That could be a bit of a problem, I would imagine. Pumlani, if we can't give you the correct answer tonight, I can tell you that next week on the show, I will be joined by William Booth, and he is a criminal defense attorney, and he will be on the show next week, and he would be the best person to answer that question, I think, unless, Nicolene, you have some insights into that?
Well, I can just make a brief comment because this is by no means my area of expertise. William will definitely be more able to answer this in the required detail that I think this does deserve. Generally speaking, I can't recall the section of the Criminal Procedure Act from the top of my head that you just mentioned. So forgive me that I'm not mentioning or analyzing that with you. I don't have it in front of me in order to make a substantial comment, so I'm actually going to refrain from doing so. However, in terms of using force, it does, in my view, just complicate things if one does use any force when any sort of investigation, police investigation or arrest is being carried out. It tends to aggravate the case if a case is brought against you. So personally, I wouldn't, from a general perspective, recommend that. I would rather say if you feel you've been mistreated or if too much force has been applied, rather than institute a complaint through the internal channels, through the police.
I could, yes.
Or then bring a damages claim if you've suffered any damages as a result of it, which is a civil action. Many people claim damages for wrongful arrest, for police brutality. We've seen some of these in the media. So I would not recommend fighting fire with fire, as they say, even though the general aspects of self-defense may be applied. It's a dangerous situation.
At the moment, there would be an attack. Two, and it's so if we look at the whole picture, like the Palmer case, is a perfect illustration where there was no provocation and the court found that it was unlawful. And if maybe I think it would be best if I call next week.
Yeah, Pumlani, we've got your number. I tell you what we'll do. We'll call you during the show, and then you can speak to William next week.
Yes, I think that would be best. Is that okay? You can get a more detailed answer.
Yes.
Is that all right?
I've been thinking this too. What I first did was I looked at the requirements of private defense, all of them, analyzed them. Not even one of them. Even looked under necessity and special relationships and not special relationships versus. But the other fields of that qualify. Officers from exemption in cases of war, soldiers and stuff like that. And I looked, police officers in general are not protected as in comparison to soldiers.
Okay, Pumlani, I think what we'll discuss this more fully next week. So we'll call you during the show next Monday. Okay.
Okay. Thanks.
All right. Thanks for calling. Good night. Bye bye. Right, off to Cindy in Pietermaritzburg. Cindy, good evening.
Hi. How are you?
Very well, and you?
Yes, I'm good.
How can we help you, Cindy?
Yes, I'm just calling to query about the father's rights over children.
So so your line is breaking up, Cindy. Sorry, you said the father's right to?
Over the kids.
The children?
Yes.
Okay, sorry. Yeah. Okay. Well,
first of all, I want to say I'm currently pregnant.
Yes.
I'm pregnant with twins. These are my first children.
Congratulations.
Yeah, congrats.
And the father of the children already has children before. Now, I just want to know, like, I always hear this debate about their rights and everything, and then you have the psychological debate, the benefits of the kids and everything. Now, my question is, like, due to the fact that of the circumstances, how he treated me, and how I just feel like I perceive him as, for my kids, they won't be capable to be a good parent to them. Is there somewhere, is there something I can do about that in future?
Well, generally speaking, the father, the father of the child does have a right to visitation and those kind of things. That's the rule of thumb. It's not correlated to whether or not he pays his maintenance or not. You can't, in other words, you can't withhold him access to his child if he hasn't paid you his monthly maintenance. Just as a side comment. If you feel maybe because he's abusive financially, emotionally, physically, or any other way, that he will not be a fit and proper parent, then you can make application to the family court to deny visitation or to have it supervised or something. But it's quite a strenuous process.
But it is possible.
It is possible.
But it's possible.
Yes.
Okay, now that is fine to me. I can. Okay.
I think explore that with an attorney, so you know exactly what you're signing up to.
Okay.
All the best.
Okay then.
And
Thank you.
good luck with the twins, Cindy.
Bye.
Thanks. Bye. Bye-bye. You're tuned to SAFM, South Africa's news and information leader. I'm Karen Key, and this is the Law Report. On the line tonight, on the show tonight, my guest is attorney Nicolene Skuman-Low, and we're talking about all sorts of things other than property and labour. So anything else we've been chatting about this evening, we're coming up to the end of the show, so we maybe could squeeze in one more call before we go. We'll be back in a moment.
The Minister of Science and Technology has published a notice to make regulations on the protection of the declared Karoo Central Astronomy Advantage Areas in terms of the Astronomy Geographic Advantage Act of 2007. The regulations restrict the use of certain radio frequencies and certain activities around the sites and give details of financial compensation measures for affected parties in terms of the law. The notice was published in the Government Gazette number 39442. And the closing date for the submission of written representations is on 22 February 2016. Communities within the affected areas are urged to attend workshops that will be held from 18 to 22 January 2016 at Kenhardt, Van Wyksvlei, Carnarvon and Williston in order to make informed representations on the draft regulations. For more information, go to www.dst.gov.za.
No one lays down the law like Karen Key. This is the Law Report on SAFM.
Well, we've got time possibly to squeeze in one last call. David in Pretoria, good evening.
Evening, and how are you?
I'm very well, and you, and compliments of the season to you.
Okay. Look, I just want to get one clarity here.
Yes.
Is it lawful or unlawful if, for example, if myself and my business partner are agreeing on a percentage for a business deal? Now, maybe we sign an agreement between myself and my business partner or business associate.
Yes.
Agreeing with a particular percentage for the particular business deal. I wanted to double check whether is it a lawful, like you talk about commission, to say on this you get a particular amount, that money is a commission for the business that you agreed upon.
Yes, you can either work your percentage out as a commission, or you can work it out as a profit share. It really depends on the type of business. So, for example, if you are selling, let's say Tupperware, that's a very well-known item to sell, and you sell a certain amount, then you get a kickback or a percentage of each of the items that you sell, and that's your commission that you earn. Or you can say, you and I are going to do business together because I'm going to do A, B, C, D, and E, and you're going to do F, G, and H. I get 70% of the profits. So all the money we make less our expenses, the amount we get then, I get 70% and you get 30%. So you can structure it in any of those ways. It's completely normal, and it's sound business practice, and it's lawful.
Oh, okay. All right.
Okay, David.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
I'm happy. Thank you.
Great. Thanks so much for
pleasure.
getting through to us. Thanks.
Hello.
Good night to you. Bye-bye. Well, we've come to the end of another program. I mean, Nicoline will be back, or we'll be talking about the law clinic. We'll be doing the law clinic again next month. So if you have any other questions that don't relate to anything else that we do here on the show, tune in on the second Tuesday of February, which is the 8th, the second Monday. Gosh, you see, this is my first day back at work and I'm already confused. Monday, the 8th of February, we'll be doing another law clinic. But Nicoline, my thanks once again for joining us.
Yeah, thank you for having me, as always.
Quite a shock to the system being back at work. I don't even know what day of the week it is.
I've been back in it for quite some time already, so...
Well, I'm glad I'm not the only one who's still slightly confused. Right, Nicoline, as I've mentioned earlier, is the director of Skuman Law Inc., attorneys, conveyancers and notaries public. They practice here in Cape Town, and she's been my guest on tonight's edition of the Law Report program. And as I said, we'll be doing another law clinic on Monday, the 8th of February. The Law Report is on the air on SAFM every Monday evening between 9 and 10. And in next week's program, I'll be joined in studio by criminal law attorney William Booth. So if you have any questions on criminal law, you can join me then. That's the Law Report next Monday, the 18th of January. And we're going to be talking about all sorts of things. William was supposed to join us towards the end of last year, but he had a bit of a problem the evening he was supposed to join us. And all of you out there were wonderful, and you rescued me, if you all remember. And you called in, and we had a wonderful evening. We spoke about all sorts of things. Just